It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the March Doug conference event, and get ready for some wonderful introductions. I think this year can only be described as an unnecessary cerebralist, probably for everybody, but I think for our profession it has some hidden benefits, if you like, and one of them I think is analytics being displayed front and center for everybody to see in the wild, in its both its benefits and its uncertainty, and I've been helped in these reflections from three different things at least. One is a wonderful book I'm just reading by Mervyn King, who was head of the Bank of England, and John Kay agency. It's called Radical Uncertainty, trying to make the point that actually a lot of the way analysts like to think we make decisions isn't really the way that people make decisions, because most of the time we have to cope with the fact that we don't know a lot of things, and the analysts help by making some things easier and simpler and clearer, but also they never know everything. And this is the idea that we teach in narratives as well as in probabilities, which is, I think, is a really great insight. And as you hear me say often about Doug, what we're about, one of the things we're about is making sure we remember that people are front and center of all that happens within analysis. The other really helpful person was the last governor of the Bank of England, who gave some wonderful talks in the Reith Lectures this year. When he talked about the importance of value, he also talked about the importance of how in economics in general and analytics, people hadn't taken account of a variety of other things. And in the end, he ended up with discussing climate change and how we need to start to bring in those metrics. And as others know, I love the idea that we have to be very careful when we're trying to think of what we're trying to optimize and what our objectives are, and how rarely can we have just single objectives. And also, the other thing I always want to remind us of my favorite Radio 4 program, More or Less, which David Spiegelhalter was going to speak to us shortly, is a regular contributor to as well. And they help us understand and approach data in an important way. And I, going back to the people thing and thinking about actually what's happened through the year, I'm a firm advocate and want Doug to give us all confidence to lead and not just follow as analysts, in particular. And I'll always go back to remembering a statistical hero of mine called George Box, who was the one who talks about models being always wrong but sometimes useful. But I remember a conference he went at where he bemoaned the fact that statisticians rarely got involved in the hypothesis creation phase. We were always the ones checking stuff. And when someone asks me how you tell a good analyst, and certainly in the commercial context, I always say they should be people who will answer your question when you ask them to do something, but will come back saying, but have you noticed this too? And have you seen this other thing? And you ought to be aware of that when you're thinking about things. So we should be the ones who are broadening out scope, adding outside perspectives, as well as trying to answer the problem that's at hand. And I think that's very relevant to what's happened before, and is incredibly important to the theme that Sir David's going to address, and Peter Jackson later, this idea of us enabling communication, bringing other people with us. And as an interesting example, as I go back to Radical Uncertainty, it amuses me how I've finally managed to have Sir David speaking at a Doug event. He may not realize that it's actually the third time that I've tried. I tried early, just approaching the Winston Centre. You might call that the conventional analysis. Then I had a completely off-model approach in that we both happened to know Andrew Harper, who was the Sheriff of Cambridgeshire. And we met at his leaving do when I happened to know the Sheriff through my civic duties as the town mayor, and Sir David was there as a colleague. He, at the time, declined because he was about to retire. And I know I've heard him already speak, I think it even was on More or Less, that this other off-model event that none of us appreciated, and I was only looking back at the Doug goals for 2020 in January last year, that off-model event called the pandemic, which I heard him say is the reason he hasn't been able to retire and go off and enjoy exploring sunnier climes for various reasons. So I'm going to shut up now and really look forward to what Sir David and Peter Jackson are going to talk to us about communication maturity, because they're all about the people rather than the process.